Hi, and welcome to a new edition for a new season of Adam Talks with me, Adam Carruthers. And we're doing things completely differently this year, something I'm really looking forward to. We've partnered up with collaboration with The Athletic. Now, if you aren't aware, The Athletic is, for me anyway, the preeminent source of footballing news, articles, analysis, anything football related, they have it. And they expand beyond just as an app for you to read. There's the website. You can do so on your computer, on your tablet, and even podcasts plus more. So weekly, I'm going to be sitting down with two writers to talk about whatever's happening in the world of the Premier League. So to introduce for the very first episode, we got Charlie Eccleshare. He's a Tottenham correspondent for The Athletic, and also Stuart James, senior football writer for The Athletic. Do you mind if I call you Stu? I'm just going to go by your your Twitter name, sorry.
Please do call me Stu, Adam.
Okay, Stu, it is. Charlie, simple enough. Let's talk firstly about Tottenham, since that's your specialty, Charlie, because the weekend match as well is so tantalizing. Spurs versus Manchester City. We'll mention Harry Kane in just a moment. I want to know, because you've been to all of the friendlies so far, and there were victories against Colchester, MK Dons, most recently against Arsenal, plus draws against Leyton Orient and Chelsea in the mix. What can we expect differently from Nuno Espirito Santo, who seemed to be about the 50th choice to be the new manager?
Yeah, that's probably about right. Well, I mean, it's, the normal caveats about only preseason games, etc. But generally, it's been very positive. They look fitter, they look sharper, they look a bit more coherent in their attacking patterns. And one thing that's been really important for them is that they've, whatever the opposite of victims of their own success, kind of beneficiaries of their own failure, because last season was such a washout in the end, a lot of players didn't get picked for the Euros, which was obviously a big shame for them. But for Spurs, it meant they weren't coming back late from pre-season. They had a bunch of guys, first friendly against Leyton Orient, mid-July. We're talking a month before the season starts, and you've got Dele Alli, Steven Bergwijn, Eric Dyer, Harry Winks, all these guys there having a completely full pre-season. And Dele and Bergwijn in particular looked really sharp. Lucas Moura, another one, was in that first friendly. He wasn't at the Copper. So I do think they might have a slight advantage, certainly on some of the teams that finished above them last season, who had tons of internationals. Man City, probably paramount amongst all of them. Spurs played them this week. So, yeah, they look sharp. And the feeling definitely on Sunday in the North London derby against Arsenal was it's a team that looks ready. They look ready for next Sunday in a way that I think a lot of their Premier League rivals don't really at this point.
Yeah, and Stu, when it comes to Nuno Espirito Santo, he's not nearly as high profile as some of the other names that were heavily linked to take over the Tottenham job. I mean, Antonio Conte, extremely high profile. But they've gone from Jose Mourinho as the permanent manager to a former player of Jose Mourinho, a former goalkeeper for Mourinho when he was at Porto, now in charge of the club. So what can we expect from Nuno himself as a manager, from what you've at least gleaned from his time at Wolves?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think the positive from that type of appointment is that Nuno actually goes to Tottenham with a lot to prove in a way, feeling really hungry. This is a great opportunity for him, one he's been waiting for, as opposed to, say, someone like Conte coming in who might have felt in a way that they were doing Tottenham a little bit of a favour. So the other thing with Nuno is, I think it's unfortunate the last season at Wolves, where they finished 13th and had a really difficult time, kind of clouds people's judgment in a way. The three previous seasons were excellent. They were incredible. Wolves went really from nowhere to a team that in 3 years later was competing in the Europa League. So, 2 seventh place finishes in the Premier League. And then last season was difficult for lots of reasons. They came on the back of a really long season, 59 games, I think it was. Jimenez obviously had that injury. They lost Jota. So it was difficult last season. There's no two ways about that. But I'm fascinated to see how he will do. I'm really interested in his style of football. Wolves were very much really a counter-attacking team. What will that look like at Tottenham? Is that Nuno's philosophy, or does that philosophy change with the different players he gets to work with at Tottenham? Does that allow him to play a more attacking brand of football? I think he'll probably need to appease the Tottenham fans, if that's the right word, to get them on side. But I don't think it's the bleak appointment that is made out to be in some quarters. Equally, there's no getting away from the fact that obviously he was a long way down that original list. So really interesting to see how it plays out, whether he gets more out of some of the players that had gone into their shell a little bit under Mourinho, that had lost their way, obvious names like Dele Alli, for example. How do they respond to someone like Nuno? Can he give them the freedom to go and play again?
How has the fan perception been, Charlie, that you've gathered from, I'm sure, tweets to you as the Athletics correspondent? And maybe if you've gotten word how the players have actually reacted to Nuno's appointment?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we'll start with the fans. I think initially there was that skepticism, a bit of a meh, after such a long, drawn-out process, 72 days, I think it was, to then settle on Nuno, who initially they hadn't gone for. It just felt a bit like they were having to settle. I think now actually the fans have been won round, by the way he's spoken. He comes across very dignified. He presents himself well, almost a bit of an anti-Jose, despite those links, because Jose is this big extrovert, loves kind of talking to the media. Nuno's not like that at all. And certainly during the Arsenal game, his name got a big cheer at the beginning of the game. Then at the end of the game, obviously they'd won it. Lots of applause for him. He's there posing for selfies, signing autographs, and it all seems pretty happy. As for the players, yeah, I think they've enjoyed it because there's been a big shift under Mourinho. They felt that training sessions, they weren't being pushed hard enough. Nuno comes in, double sessions pretty much every time. They're being worked really hard. Nuno is very forward-thinking, cutting edge in a lot of the sports science side of things. And they're feeling the benefits. They feel fitter, they feel sharper. And a few of those players that you mentioned, it's been interesting, someone like Dele, who last season, we know what happened with Jose, and there was an incident against Stoke when Jose had a pop at him for giving the ball away. Nuno's been a bit more encouraging towards those players. At the moment, he wants them to go and express themselves. So the players are feeling pretty positive. And Nuno's not someone who talks a huge amount to them. He does his work on the training ground and then largely keeps himself to himself. But the first impressions have been very good. But, this being football, if they get a bad result on Sunday, then the narrative will change. But yeah, a positive start.
A quick mention of the transfers. Now, I'm not talking about outgoing transfers. We'll get to that. I'm talking about the incoming transfers. So Brian Hill, who's was competing in the Olympics, so we're not expecting him to report to duty anytime soon. Golini and Romero coming in from Atlanta, very much defensive recruitments, a centre-back and a goalkeeper. Is that a positive step in the right direction for you, Charlie, for Tottenham, and trying to fix any issues they had last season?
Yeah, I think the signings have been really good. And actually, surprisingly, Hill is expected to report back to training today and then could even be in contention on Sunday, which feels like a remarkable turnaround, given he was playing at the Olympics on the weekend. But he had a break before, so it's slightly different, obviously, for players coming back from the Euros and the Copa. But yeah, from speaking to guys in Spain, and I did a big piece on him, there's a huge amount of excitement. This is a guy who's seen as a bit of a throwback. Someone who'll get the ball down, likes to dribble, likes to get the byline and cross. So he's really exciting. Christian Romero, likewise, really, really exciting signing and hopefully going to solve one of the biggest issues they had last season and have had really since Toby Alderweireld and Jan Vertonghen started to decline a bit. And then Golini, solid second choice keeper. And you're starting to think about that Lloris succession plan, which again has been something kicked into the long grass for a while. There could be more signings as well. So I think that's been a real positive. And Fabio Paratici, the incoming managing director of football, has kind of shown what he's all about. Bulging context book, never off his phone. And yes, they're spending money and bringing in some exciting talent.
We don't need to get...
Just saying on that, sorry, I'm fascinated to see Romero play. I mean, reading your piece the other day, Charlie, that stat stood out to me. 39 yellow cards and 3 reds in 102 games in Italy. So he sounds quite old school in his sort of style of defending, really uncompromising, really physical. How does he adapt to the Premier League? That would be, really interesting. But yeah, those numbers sort of jumped off the page to me.
Sweepstake on his first yellow and first red. The North London derby's end of September. Maybe he'll, save it for then. But yeah, I mean, apparently Gasperini last season at Atalanta would take him off on quite a few occasions because he was on a booking and the second one felt inevitable. But yeah, a monster on the pitch, very shy off it.
His nickname is Cuti, and in Malaysia that means holiday. So let's hope he doesn't spend too long on Cuti whilst playing for Spurs. Now Lautaro Martinez might be coming in as well. There's a lot of rumours concerning that, but I really have to move on and talk about the outgoing transfer, the potential outgoing transfer. We saw Manchester City play in the weekend, losing against Leicester. Now, Stu, we can't read too much into the Community Shield. With all due respect, it can be viewed as a glorified friendly. Players have different fitness levels. Both sides were missing key players in key areas. I mean, Leicester's defense was decimated by injuries. And Foden and De Bruyne will always be part of the strongest lineup for Manchester City nowadays. However, for the first time in a decade, Stu, about 10 years, they're looking for a top-tier striker since losing Sergio Aguero. Year in, year out, season in, season out, different managers, they've always had Aguero there. It was never an issue. They haven't had to go out and break the bank for a new striker. Now, they've got Grealish in, but based on what you saw on the weekend, and I'm going to assume you watched the game, how much do Manchester City need Harry Kane? And do you think the deal's going to go through?
How much do they need him? There's no denying it would make a big difference. The thing I'd say about the absence of Aguero, a few years ago, I'd have felt that was more significant because he played so little football, Adam, last season, and City found a way to get around that fairly comfortably, really, with playing a false nine and Guardiola being, brilliant in how he sets the team up in different ways to combat the absence of an out-and-out striker. I still don't feel it's an issue for them in the same way as it would be for, say, I think Chelsea's need to bring in Lukaku is greater than Manchester City's need to bring in Kane. But that's not to say that Kane wouldn't clearly make a huge difference to the City team. Will the deal happen? I'm quite torn on this. I mean, Kane's desire to go there is absolutely clear, obviously. City's desire to sign him is, but we come back to what you think you probably know I'm going to say here, Daniel Levy. I mean, I spoke to another Premier League owner last week and we were talking about transfer sagas and he was saying, in terms of dealing with Daniel Levy, he'd never come across anyone so unemotional and so hard to negotiate with. So I really don't know whether he could end up digging his heels in here to such an extent that Kane ends up staying. And I know we've had this situation with the training, but I'm not sure. I mean, Kane's obviously come out and said a few things since to try and make things better with the supporters. I'm not sure how hard Kane would go towards the end of the window. Charlie, I'm sure, will be better qualified than me to say that, but I'm not convinced he's going to end up going.
Charlie?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these ones that changes day by day because you talk to different people and they tell you different things. And there's a little bit more confidence, I would say, I've detected from sources close to City over the past few days. Maybe these sort of glimmers are appearing, but it does come down to whether, they're going to go as high as Levy wants. And he does hold all the power because, as has been well documented, Kane still has 3 years left on his contract. So he doesn't really have a lot of leverage. I mean, I think it's more likely now than I would have said a couple of weeks ago, but I still put it at about 50-50 as to whether it's going to happen. We've seen so many times before, haven't we, that once it gets towards transfer deadline day, suddenly things accelerate and you kind of wonder why couldn't this happen before, because it's quite clear, there's an amount around about 150 million that would probably force Levy's hands, though, the message is they wouldn't sell to another Premier League club. I suspect for that sort of money, it gets into the realms of being irresponsible to turn it down, and Levy's stewardship of Tottenham is nothing but responsible. So I think it could happen, but you ask me tomorrow, I might have a different answer. It's definitely not conclusive at that point. If anyone tells you they know at this point, I don't believe them because I don't think anyone really does yet. And Stu says, it comes down, how much does Kane want to push it? We've already seen him slightly backtrack because, initially he didn't report to training and then he said he would, and that it was never a case of not reporting to training. So is that his stance softening because he wants to build bridges and play for the club? Or is that him thinking, actually, this might be a more expedient way to get out of the club? There's a lot of second guessing. One thing I suspect will happen is that it will rumble on until August 31st. We'll see.
What about how Nuno's been handling it? I mean, he's been thrust straight into the deep end here, Stu. He's given a statement saying he will be speaking to Harry Kane and all of that, but do you think he's handling it appropriately? Do you think this is an issue that he should be handling, or is it solely in the hands of the owner? Because Nuno's not going to be handling the budget here.
Well, it's interesting because it raises this theme. Nuno's always been very much a head coach. That's his remit. And especially because he's always had Jorge Mendes at the other clubs he's been at. And we know Mendes has had a big say in transfers. And Nuno's fine with that. He sees himself as a head coach. He does his work on the training ground. That's where he's happiest. That's where he's best. And he trusts the other people around him to do their jobs. Obviously, this is so big. And yes, it's mainly about Levy, Fabio Paratici to an extent. But there will come a point at which Nuno has to, play a part as well. I think maybe the one step he made was saying that he hadn't spoken to Kane, up until the start of this week. That was what he was saying. And I think it might have been, I don't know the way of putting it, the politically more shrewd move to even just send him a message, just so he can say when asked that question, yeah, we've had contact. Nuno's a very straight guy. I don't think he thinks in that way. His message has always been, look, I didn't want to disturb him. I wanted to wait until he was in the building. We could have a chat face to face. And I get that, but I think that raised a bit of alarm. Otherwise, I think he has handled it well. He's been pretty straight in press conferences when asked about it. And it's a difficult one for him because he knows that every press conference until August 31st, that's going to be the main question. That's all anyone really wants to know. So it's a tricky one for him. I do think as well that it might curry some favour with supporters because they have a bit of sympathy towards him having this very difficult situation to deal with. And again, tying into what I was saying before about the way he presents himself with quite a lot of dignity and poise, I think that's been apparent with Kane as well.
Surely it comes down, though, to wanting trophies. Money, he's already very highly paid at Spurs. I'm sure City could pay more, yes, but trophies. He's at the age now where he's entering the peak of his career, isn't he, Charlie?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think everyone understands why he wants to move. And I think even most Tottenham fans understand that. I think their disappointment is how it's kind of unfolded with the not being at training and that sort of thing. But yeah, absolutely. And especially having had another disappointment in the summer with the Euros final, he is getting to that point. He's probably aware, he turns 29 next summer. So, he's looking at a point where how much more of a window does he have to make this big move? And he does deserve trophies commensurate with his talent and his application and everything like that. And he might look, my understanding was that he was pretty put out by Spurs sacking Mourinho a week before the League Cup final. Kane got on well with Mourinho. Mourinho has a proven track record of winning trophies. And yes, winning the Carabao Cup wouldn't sate his desire for trophies, but it would be a start. And they're bringing in a guy, Nuno, who hasn't won a major trophy as a manager. So, yeah, I don't think you could accuse Kane of, anything other than a totally rational decision. But the point is, it's just not in his hands. That's the problem. Ever since he signed that 6-year deal in 2018, it's been taken out of his hands.
Yeah. And of course, there are multiple articles on The Athletic concerning this. There's also a superb article, which I've read a few days ago, about how the whole Jack Grealish move came about to Manchester City. Stu, what do you make of this move? Does it make sense? How do you see him fitting into the Guardiola system? Because there are still very, very good players at the club. We're expecting Bernardo Silva to leave, yes, but still, competition is going to be fierce and not everyone's going to be happy. That's probably going to be Guardiola's biggest task, trying to keep his squad with a smile on their face.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you just think of Foden, De Bruyne and Grealish, on their own, I mean, what a trio that is. And then you've got all the players around the edges. Like you say, all the signs are that Bernardo Silva will leave, Mahrez, you have to accommodate somewhere. Sterling as well. Yeah. So yeah, it is the classic embarrassment of riches, really. But I think for Grealish, it is absolutely the right move at this time. We've just been talking about Kane wanting to win trophies. It was interesting the other day speaking to Neil Taylor, who played with Grealish obviously for 3 or 4 years, and he says he remembers something flashing up during the Carabao Cup final, saying something like it was Foden's 5th trophy already, and he said, why wouldn't Grealish want to be part of something like that? And he's obviously a number of years older than Foden. So I think he's, the last couple of seasons at Villa, there might have been some question marks over Jack before. Can he really do it on a consistent basis? Will he, his numbers, his assists, his goals, can he deliver those across a course of a Premier League season? And he's absolutely done that. The fascinating thing is, can Guardiola now take him to another level? Ultimately, we are talking about a player here who couldn't regularly get into the England team in the Euros. And I would love to have seen Grealish having that opportunity. Southgate obviously had his own reasons for not doing that, but can Guardiola take him to a place where actually you simply have to pick him for England because he's improved that much? Questions will be asked about what Grealish does without the ball. I think we've all seen how hard Guardiola's got people working over time. Mahrez springs to mind. At Leicester, he wasn't someone who particularly trapped back. I think you see him doing far more of that now in a City shirt. So will that side be added to his game? Suggestions that you might well play him as a number 8. Interestingly, at Villa, the feeling was always that he was strongest coming in off the left. So lots of different permutations there for City. And obviously, if they don't get Kane, in a way, it probably makes it easier to try and find ways of accommodating all those players. But I think it's the right move for Grealish. And I don't think he's the sort of player, you can see how he's spoken the last 24, 48 hours. He's not the sort of player to be fazed by that price tag. I don't think Grealish thinks like that. I think he just plays football with total freedom. And I don't think the 100 million will make any difference to him.
Yeah, if there's any manager out there that could probably tinker around with fitting players into different positions than we're expected to, Guardiola's name springs to mind more than any other gaffer out there. But speaking of other big transfers, this one is not confirmed yet, although we're expecting it to be done maybe by the time this broadcast later on today. Romelu Lukaku. Now, I spoke about an article on The Athletic about Jack Grealish's move. There's also an excellent article about Lukaku and how he has changed from what we saw before, how he has evolved as a player, arguably into even better centre forward than Harry Kane is. Okay, he doesn't have as many assists, but boy, can he whack in the goals. Charlie, do you think he has a point to prove by coming back to Chelsea?
In lots of ways, yeah, because not only was he released or let go by Chelsea, there was the fact that at United, I think it ended on a bit of a sour note. I think he got a lot of criticism, and he does strike me as someone who felt it. I think he's quite a smart guy. I think he was aware of the perception, which to me often seemed unfair. And he comes back, as you say, this more complete player, someone who's absolutely shown again and again and again he can score goals at the highest level. So, yeah, I think there's definitely that sense for him of unfinished business. That there's always been question marks about him, wasn't it? Even at United, his first season there, and he's scoring goal after goal, but he doesn't score against the big teams. That it felt like people were always looking for something to, flaws to find in his game when it was quite hard to do that, I thought, a lot of the time, given this is a guy who can score, he's good in the air, can score off either foot. Obviously, we know how strong he is and how creative he can be as well. But that looks like a really good signing. Talking about does City need a striker? Well, probably the one thing missing from Chelsea was, I know they spent a lot of money on Werner, but he didn't score a lot of goals and he can sort of move out wide as well. The one thing that they were lacking was that really good clinical striker. They've got that. And I have to say, watching Chelsea in the first 50 minutes against Spurs in that friendly last week before they made a bunch of changes, Chelsea looked so good. I mean, I was watching that thinking, there is no reason they shouldn't be pushing City for the title this season. And now you throw Lukaku. And maybe that will force City to really go for Kane because they're aware that suddenly Chelsea with Lukaku, that's a squad comparable in that City's, I would say.
Yeah, and anybody who had any doubts, I think, about Lukaku, if they've watched him play in the Euros, he won a few Man of the Match awards. Even in one game where he didn't score, but his contribution was immense, shows how much he has developed. And to really deliver the Scudetto to Inter after, 10 years without the title was some achievement as well. A quick mention also for Manchester United, Stu, because again, actually, there's another article. Laurie Whitwell, I think, wrote an article about how Solskjaer has evolved as a manager, how he's more ready now than he was when he first took over, how much he's changed and how things are like under his stewardship. In fact, he was on a podcast, I think it came out today, I was listening to it, talking about it, expanding further on the article on one of the Athletic podcasts. Great listen for anybody out there. Please do look it up. It can go into much more detail than we can here now because it's about 50 minutes long. But Varane, due to come in any day now. Well, he's already had his medical. It's just waiting for the announcement. Sancho is already confirmed. He might feature this weekend. How much of a threat do you think they're going to be, Stu?
Well, I mean, they're two excellent signings. Varane alongside Maguire will undoubtedly improve United at the back. There's always been those question marks there. Sancho, really excited about watching him. Would like to see more of him in the Euros, to be honest. He's been brilliant at Dortmund and will undoubtedly, with his goals and assists, make a big contribution at United. I still have a few question marks, Adam. I'm looking at the sort of goal return last season up front. I think Cavani and Rashford and Martial only scored 2 more goals than Kane between them. Obviously, Cavani wasn't a regular starter. Now, I think he started 13 Premier League games last season. He's obviously an exceptional talent. Could United get that up nearer 2025? I don't know, but that would be my one question mark over United. The absence of a number 9, like we've just been talking about, with regard to a Kane or a Lukaku. But definitely they'll be stronger. I don't see them yet being at the level of Chelsea or City. I'm totally with Charlie. I look at Chelsea's squad now, they've brought in Lukaku, and I think it's formidable. I really think they can go toe-to-toe with City this season. So yes, United have made big improvements. Are those improvements enough to take them towards winning the title? I'm not convinced.
Okay. Well, late last week, rather, I was covering the Community Shield with Neil Lennon and Chris Sutton. They were talking about favourites for the title, mentioning all the teams we've just talked about. Here's what they had to say specifically about Manchester United, which I found fascinating.
Not Manchester United in that equation for you, even though it looks like they're trying to address any defensive issues by getting Rafael Varane in to partner Harry Maguire. Jadon Sancho, no?
No, not for me. I don't think the midfield's good enough. I think they've still got a problem with goalkeeper. I don't know if they're going to go with De Gea or they're going to go with Henderson. Watching in the Europa League final was a great opportunity to win a trophy, and they couldn't do it.
And I'm with Neil on Manchester United. I don't know why. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has done a really good job there, but there's something in my stomach which is telling me for whatever reason, they aren't as good as a Chelsea or a Manchester City, and they'll have to prove me wrong. I think Sancho is a great piece of business. I think Varane is an upgrade, but there's something about them. And Neil mentioned the Europa League final, losing that. That's going to put more pressure on the manager. We know what it's like at Manchester United. You lose 2 games on the spin, and there's an element of the United support who say, sack the manager. He's not good enough. He's not experienced enough. He's not won enough. I just think had he won that Europa League, it would have been so big for him. So I think the pressure's on at United this season. And Norwich City,
he's not won anything. So he's been there 2.5 years now.
Exactly.
Maybe more. He's not won anything. He's been one final. He's been in a couple of semi-finals. I keep hearing about this progress Man United are making, and I don't see it.
So thanks once again to Chris and Neil for taking part in that. And I found it interesting. It wasn't so much about the signings. That was the impression I got, Charlie, when it comes to making Manchester United favourites or not. It was the manager, the lack of experience, the lack of trophies, really. I mean, yes, they all have fantastic squads. They're all great players. These are elite level clubs. And it could really just come down to the management. We saw the Europa League final last season, but we've seen what Pep can do in the league. He's dominated domestic football. Tuchel winning the Champions League. Who are your favourites ahead of the season starting? Firstly, with Charlie.
City and Chelsea for me. I think Chelsea are long overdue. It's mad really, because since they won the league in 2017, they haven't even nearly been in a title race. And you think the fact they've always spent a lot of money, had strong squads. I know they had that year where they couldn't buy players, but generally they've invested heavily. So I think they're long overdue one. Obviously, they're the Champions League holders. I think they look more complete. And I would agree with Stu and Chris and Neil that there does just seem to be a little something lacking with United. Partly for me as well, it's because we've been here many times before where they've had a summer where they've signed some, world-class players. And you think, I remember when they signed Di Maria and Falcao, which is now, 7 years ago. Mm. And similarly having this feeling of, wow, United have got these Galactico players. Maybe they're going to challenge for the title, and they didn't. And so, maybe it's a bit of a once bitten, twice shy with them. But I would go City and Chelsea. Liverpool, I feel, are just a little bit kind of past their peak. I feel like they're slightly rebuilding. So I don't think they're as ready as those two teams.
Yeah, I was just about to mention Liverpool as well. They're the only team to have broken that City monopoly in the Premier League, winning it Wow, during Project Restart, seems like a while ago now. But when it comes to Liverpool as well, perhaps their signings haven't been as impactful, Stu, as we've seen from the other sides. Yeah, they got returning players. That's great. But the front line weren't firing on all cylinders last season. And you do wonder how they're going to keep up with the rest. It's going to be a fascinating battle. But who do you put as the top two favourites for the title, Stu?
Yeah, I think without doubt, I'm with Charlie. City and Chelsea are, for me, ahead of the others. I think my view of Liverpool's probably tainted by last season, which may be a little unfair, given that they had huge injury problems. You know, we can't overlook the absence of Van Dijk and Gomez and what that did to Liverpool and what impact that would have had on other teams if they'd have lost such key players, perhaps. But yeah, the question marks over that front three, which is amazing to say that, really, given how brilliant Firmino, Mane and Salah have been in the past. Salah still scored, something like 22 Premier League goals, I think, last season. Mane really tailed off. So be interesting to see what he's like this season. They haven't spent in the transfer market like other clubs have. They've made signings, but nothing like on the same scale. So, yeah, really interesting to see how they do, how young Harvey Elliott gets on. They've got really high hopes for him. I thought he might go out on another loan, having done brilliantly last season, but it sounds like they see him as someone who can play the type of minutes that Shaqiri played last season, assuming Shaqiri now moves on. But it's a big ask, I think, for Liverpool in terms of squad depth to compete with City and Chelsea.
Yeah, they'll be hoping that Jota doesn't get injured because he looked like the goal solution last season till he picked up his injury. And I guess that pretty much wraps things up on this end. I just have one more question because I'm getting a lot of tweets about this and messages on Instagram. VAR and what changes we can expect for next season. I had a briefing with the Premier League, I think about 2 weeks ago. They did explain it, but Stu, do you want to take it away first? What can we expect differently this campaign to alleviate any issues that we saw last year?
Well, if it works well, we're told that we should see an end to many of those ridiculous offside calls, Adam, that, drove plenty of us bonkers. I remember the Bamford one at Palace with the armpit, wasn't it? I think something crazy. Or his hand, he was pointing, wasn't he? Pointing where he wanted the ball, and then it was his armpit that was offside. So, we're going to have thicker lines now, which in theory should give the benefit to the attacking players. And I think I read Mike Riley saying that it should mean that 20 or so goals that were disallowed last season will be allowed this season. So that's obviously one thing. And then I think I'm right in saying that with penalties, there had been this feeling that any contact was a foul and a penalty. And we had a record number of penalties last season. And so I think they wanted to address that. And that means now that contact won't necessarily mean a foul, and they'll look at the context around it and the extent to which perhaps they believe the player initiated that contact, that kind of thing. So as ever with these things, they sound good in theory. What they're like in practice, only time will tell.
Yeah, it's a three-step process now for the referee to ask 3 questions in order to give a penalty. But Charlie, we saw in the Euros how seamless it can be. And fans of the Premier League and fans of the clubs will probably be a little bit jealous, are hoping that some of the Euro magic will be able to be transferred to the Premier League.
Possibly, yeah. I'm not too optimistic. I mean, I'm someone who I'll be honest, I would just love to get rid of VAR. I don't think there's enough of an upside. I think it's awful for match-going fans. It takes away one of the single best thing about football, which is that moment, that ecstasy. And that's not there anymore. And I genuinely think it's a real shame. It's the thing more than any. I've never really understood why. Maybe it's when I was younger, I didn't understand why people get really het up about things that to me seem really trivial. But this is the first time there's been something that it feels a bit game's gone for me, that dreaded expression. But yeah, kind of sitting around and you can't celebrate a goal because, especially if you're at the game, there's this thing going on and you don't really have any idea. But I accept it's here to stay. So yeah, if these improvements make it better, then great. And yeah, as you say, the Euros showed that it can be workable. But even at the Euros, I still would rather it wasn't there. But that's just my view.
I'm just afraid if I say that, I'm 36, I'm just going to sound like a grumpy old man. Back in my day, getting my
exactly. I know. I'm conscious of that. Yeah.
You look young, so it's fine. You can pass it off. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both for joining me here today. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I'm really hoping that this season will be as good as yesteryear in the Premier League. And you know what? I'm certain it will be, because just when I think something can't be topped, the Premier League does it again. We didn't even mention players missing for the AFCON, additional transfers at all the other clubs, Patrick Vieira. There's so many narratives, but I want to wish you the best of luck covering all of this and more. I know it's going to be a very tiring August. The transfer market's still open. So wishing you the best of luck, and we'll catch up with the both of you again very, very soon. You're both on Twitter. I know Stu is. Charlie, I'm pretty sure you are as well.
I am, yeah.
Okay, be giving you a quick follow in just a moment. And thank you, of course, for watching this. We'll be back on the screens for the Premier League coverage starting on Friday night, Saturday morning in Malaysia, I should add, as Brentford will be taking on Arsenal. A lot of fun there. And of course, all the games across the weekend as well. If you want further in-depth analysis, like I mentioned, the Athletic app, you can choose to read it on your tablet or on your phone like I do. Podcasts as well. There's plenty out there where things get really, really in-depth and well worth a listen if you're in your car or just sitting in your living room. Anyway, Adam Carruthers signing out for now. Be back again next week.